The granite gates of Stonehaven had barely faded into the morning mist when the true weight of King Theron's dying plea settled upon Sir Calin. His company, a small but battle-hardened cadre of Eldorian knights, rode in grim silence, their gazes fixed on the treacherous path ahead. Each thud of hooves on the ancient road seemed to echo the chasm of animosity separating Eldoria from Viridia, a divide Calin was now tasked to bridge with diplomacy rather than steel. The very air grew colder as they descended into the Whispering Plains, a scarred no-man's land where generations of skirmishes had etched a bleak history into the very earth. Calin, ever the strategist, kept his senses sharp, scanning the desolate expanse for any sign of movement. His unwavering sense of justice warred with the stark pragmatism demanded by this perilous journey. He knew the plains were a crucible, a place where the old hatreds festered, often exploding into sudden, brutal violence. This was not merely a diplomatic mission. It was a passage through the very heart of the conflict he sought to end, a baptism by fire into the realities of a fractured realm. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat. Every gust of wind carried the ghosts of past battles. Their first encounter arrived with the suddenness of a viper's strike. From a copse of gnarled skeletal trees, a band of riders, cloaked in the muted greens and browns favored by Viridian scouts, burst forth. Their battle cries, sharp and guttural, were instantly recognizable, filled with the inherited scorn that had poisoned relations for centuries. Caelin's hand flew to his sword hilt, his training taking over as his mind registered the familiar pattern of a border ambush. His knights, disciplined and ready, formed a defensive wedge around him, their shields locked tight, a glint of steel reflecting the pale morning light. The clash was swift and brutal, a microcosm of the larger war Calin desperately hoped to avert. Swords rang against shields, the air filled with the grunt of men and the desperate whinny of horses. Calin moved with a fluid grace born of countless training bouts and real battlefields, his blade a silver blur, deflecting blows and finding openings with practiced ease. He fought with a controlled fury, not out of hatred, but out of a fierce determination to protect his men and fulfill his king's sacred trust. Each parry, each thrust, was a grim reminder of the lives lost to this senseless feud. As the Viridian attackers, disorganized and surprised by the Eldorians' disciplined response, began to falter, Calin noticed something unsettling. Their eyes, usually burning with fierce loyalty, held a glint of desperation, almost a wildness beyond mere patriotism. It was a subtle detail, a flicker of something darker than simple animosity, which gave Calin pause amidst the chaos. He wondered if this was merely the desperation of skirmishers, or if some unseen hand was stirring the pot of discontent, pushing these men to reckless abandon. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, a premonition of the insidious threat his king had warned him about. With the skirmish ended and the Viridian scouts scattered, Calin surveyed the brief battlefield, his gaze lingering on the fallen. He felt no triumph, only a deep weariness that settled in his bones. This was the cost of division, the endless cycle of violence that had claimed so many. He knew his mission was not just about forging alliances, but about stemming this tide of bloodshed, about finding a common ground where such encounters became relics of a forgotten past. The idealism that had always fueled him now felt like a fragile flame in a growing gale. Pushing forward, the landscape grew more desolate, the air heavier with an unnatural stillness that was more foreboding than any storm. The Whispering Plains, true to their name, seemed to sigh with ancient sorrow, a stark contrast to the martial pride of Eldoria or the scholarly grace of Iridia. Calin, usually so focused on the immediate tactical situation, found his thoughts drifting to the encroaching darkness King Theron had spoken of, a threat that seemed to transcend the petty squabbles of men. He wondered if these skirmishes were merely symptoms of a deeper malaise, a festering wound on the very soul of Etheria. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange, Calin spurred his horse onward. The lights of Viridia's border outposts, distant and unwelcoming, began to prick the deepening twilight. He knew the true challenge lay ahead, not just in facing a wary queen or a distrustful court, but in convincing hearts hardened by generations of hatred to embrace a future of unity. The journey had shown him the depth of the animosity, and the path to peace would be fraught with far greater perils than a mere skirmish on the plains. The gleaming spires of Sunstone City, a stark contrast to Eldoria's rugged fortresses, rose like polished teeth against the azure sky. Sir Kalen, astride his war-horse, felt the weight of every Viridian gaze upon him as he rode through the main gate. The air, usually vibrant with the chatter of merchants and the distant hum of artisans, was muted, replaced by a palpable tension that clung to the ornate archways and swept through the wide, sun-drenched plazas. His Eldorian armor, burnished obsidian and steel, seemed to absorb the light, making him a somber, unwelcome figure in this bright, sophisticated realm. Whispers, sharp and resentful, followed his retinue like a shadow. Viridian guards, their polished helmets reflecting the city's golden light, watched with narrowed eyes, their hands resting on sword hilts. Kalen kept his expression impassive, a shield against the torrent of suspicion. He understood their animosity. Generations of skirmishes and bloodshed had carved deep valleys of distrust between their peoples. Yet the dying King Theron's plea echoed in his mind, a solemn vow to bridge this chasm, no matter the personal cost. The procession moved slowly, a deliberate pace through streets wider and cleaner than any in Stonehaven. Merchants paused their haggling, scholars peered from arched windows, and children, usually boisterous, clung to their parents' skirts, their innocent faces etched with fear. Kalen observed the intricate carvings on the buildings, the flowing fountains, and the vibrant tapestries adorning public squares, a testament to Viridia's cultural richness. Yet beneath the beauty, a cold, unyielding pride simmered, ready to erupt. Finally, they reached the king's grand palace, a structure of white marble and gold that seemed to radiate power. Before its colossal bronze doors, Kalen dismounted, his boots ringing on the polished stone. A stiff-backed royal steward, adorned in silks of deep sapphire, emerged, his gaze sweeping over Kalen's Eldorian standard with undisguised disdain. "State your purpose, Eldorian knight," the steward demanded, his voice thin and sharp, carrying the weight of Viridian authority. Kalen met the steward's gaze, his voice steady and resonant. "I am Sir Kalen of Eldoria, sent by my late King Theron. I carry a decree of utmost urgency, a plea for alliance against a darkness that threatens both our kingdoms." He presented the sealed parchment bearing the royal crest of Eldoria, a symbol of both his authority and the desperate hope he carried. The steward took it with an almost imperceptible flinch, as if the parchment itself might be tainted. "The King of Viridia, by his grace, is occupied with matters of state," the steward announced, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Your request will be considered. You will be assigned quarters within the guest compound. An audience, if granted, will be communicated at the king's leisure." The words were a thinly veiled insult, a clear message of Viridia's perceived superiority and its reluctance to treat with a long-standing enemy, even on a matte air of shared survival. A flicker of frustration, quickly suppressed, tightened Kalen's jaw. He had anticipated resistance, but the sheer arrogance of the reception was a bitter draught. He knew Lord Valerius, back in Eldoria, would undoubtedly be pleased by such a frosty welcome, perhaps even subtly working to ensure it. The true enemy, however, was not the pride of Viridia, but the creeping shadow that sought to consume all, and the insidious rot of ambition that gnawed at the heart of his own kingdom. Kalen nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the steward's words, though not their sentiment. "We await the king's decree." He turned, leading his weary retinue towards the designated quarters, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. The path to unity, he realized, would be longer and more arduous than any battlefield conquest, demanding not just steel and courage, but an unyielding will against the forces of suspicion and betrayal, both within and without. The Viridian audience chamber, unlike the stark granite halls of Eldoria, presented a tableau of opulent tapestries and gleaming marble, its air thick with the scent of jasmine and the murmured whispers of courtiers. Sir Kalen, accustomed to the martial austerity of Stonehaven, felt the weight of countless discerning gazes upon him, each one a silent judgment. His armor, polished to a dull sheen, seemed a stark anachronism amidst the intricate filigree and vibrant hues that adorned the walls. He stood tall, his posture unwavering, a beacon of Eldorian resolve in a profoundly alien land, awaiting the princess. Princess Lyra entered, not with the typical fanfare Kaelin expected of royalty, but with a quiet dignity that commanded immediate attention. Her gown, a deep emerald that mirrored her sharp, intelligent eyes, flowed around her with understated elegance. There was an undeniable strength in her bearing, a shrewdness that belied her youthful grace, and Kaelin immediately recognized a formidable intellect. She carried herself with the assured confidence of one born to power, yet her expression remained carefully neutral, a mask of Viridian diplomacy. Their initial exchange was a delicate dance of formal pleasantries, each word meticulously chosen, each gesture measured. Lyra's voice, though soft, carried an edge of tempered steel, questioning Kaelin's presence with a politeness that barely concealed her kingdom's deep-seated skepticism. Kaelin, in turn, responded with the direct, unvarnished honesty characteristic of an Eldorian knight, his words devoid of the courtly artifice he found so prevalent here. The air between them, despite the veneer of cordiality, crackled with generations of mistrust and ancient animosities. He spoke of King Theron's dying wish, of the desperate need for unity against a common foe far more insidious than their petty squabbles. Kaelin described the encroaching darkness not as a distant threat, but as a tangible, growing malevolence that sought to consume all of Etheria, regardless of kingdom or allegiance. His voice, usually steady in battle, now carried a raw urgency, born of his unwavering conviction and the terrible sights he had witnessed on the Whispering Plains. He laid bare the gravity of their situation, hoping to pierce through the political barriers. Lyra listened, her gaze unwavering, observing every nuance of his expression, every tremor in his voice. She posed incisive questions about the specifics of the threat, about Eldoria's current defenses, and about the true extent of Kaelin's authority in seeking such an unprecedented alliance. Her inquiries were not accusatory, but rather a methodical dissection, testing the veracity of his claims and the depth of his commitment. She sought not just words, but the truth that lay beneath them, understanding the precarious equilibrium upon which their world now balanced. As Kaelin detailed the chilling whispers from the Shadowfen marshes and the creeping blight on the eastern borders, a subtle shift occurred in Lyra's demeanor. Her initial wariness did not vanish entirely, but a flicker of something akin to shared understanding, perhaps even a nascent respect, ignited in her emerald eyes. They spoke of the darkness not as representatives of feuding kingdoms, but as two leaders facing a common, existential threat, their individual burdens momentarily aligned by the overwhelming peril. The weight of their respective duties seemed to momentarily bridge the chasm between them. A moment passed where their gazes met, a silent acknowledgement of the immense task before them, far grander than any political maneuvering. Kaelin saw not just a princess, but a formidable mind capable of seeing beyond ancient grievances, and Lyra perceived not merely an Eldorian warrior, but a man of genuine honor and unwavering purpose. This fleeting connection, born of shared apprehension and a burgeoning mutual respect, hinted at possibilities beyond mere alliance, suggesting a deeper partnership might yet blossom between them. The formal audience concluded, leaving a tentative agreement for further discussions. But the unspoken currents beneath the surface had irrevocably shifted. Kaelin departed with a new, cautious hope, understanding that while the path to unity would be fraught with challenges, he had found an unexpected, albeit wary, ally in the shrewd princess of Viridia. The seed of a fragile peace had been planted, though the fertile ground of trust still needed careful cultivation, and the shadows of betrayal still loomed unseen. Deep within the labyrinthine archives beneath the forgotten spire of Athel, Alara traced the faded glyphs of an ancient tome, its brittle pages exuding the scent of dust and forgotten ages. Candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows that mimicked the spectral entities she sometimes glimpsed on the fringes of her vision, remnants of the very darkness she tirelessly sought to understand. Days blurred into weeks, sustained by meager rations and an unyielding obsession, as she deciphered prophecies whispered from a time before the kingdoms of Eldoria and Viridia drew their first bitter lines. Her fingers, stained with ink and grime, moved with a practiced grace, revealing layers of cryptic wisdom veiled by centuries of neglect and deliberate obfuscation. The air grew heavy, charged with the latent magic of the place, pressing down upon her as if the very secrets she pursued resisted revelation. She knew this path was fraught with peril, a solitary journey into the forbidden, yet the encroaching shadow demanded answers no conventional scholar dared seek. Her latest focus revolved around a series of fragmented inscriptions, hinting at a primordial ritual performed by a forgotten civilization, one that seemingly held dominion over the very essence of shadow. These texts were not mere historical records. They vibrated with an ominous power, echoing the whispers of the Shadowfen marshes, a place many feared to even name. Alara cross-referenced these fragments with star charts older than any living memory, aligning celestial patterns with arcane symbols, searching for the key to unlock their true meaning. The language itself seemed to resist translation, shifting like smoke, demanding an intuitive understanding that transcended mere linguistics. Each successful decipherment felt like a small victory against the encroaching oblivion, yet also a step further into the abyss of dangerous knowledge. She understood that such power, whether for good or ill, carried a terrible price. Then, amidst a particularly dense passage describing the weeping star and its cyclical alignment, a distinct pattern emerged, coalescing from the chaotic swirl of ancient dialects and half-truths. A chilling clarity descended upon Alara, a sudden, undeniable understanding that resonated deep within her magical core. The darkness, it seemed, was not merely a chaotic force, but a hunger, a primal entity that could be temporarily ed, or perhaps even banished by a specific, long-forgotten ritual. Her breath caught in her throat, the revelation both terrifying and exhilarating. This was not the simple weakness she had hoped for, but a complex, almost paradoxical solution that hinged on a delicate balance of sacrifice and power. The implications of her discovery rippled through her, shaking the very foundations of her understanding of the world. The ritual, detailed in stark, unsettling terms, spoke of drawing upon the essence of a bloodstone shard, an artifact steeped in aeons of forgotten magic and raw cosmic energy. It was a relic rumored to have been shattered during the Sundering, the cataclysmic event that reshaped Etheria and gave birth to the Shadowfen marshes themselves. The texts warned of its immense power, capable of either binding the encroaching shadow or unleashing an even greater cataclysm upon the realm. Such a relic would require not only immense magical fortitude to wield, but also a specific perilous journey to its last known resting place, an ancient temple buried deep within the treacherous, mist-shrouded heart of the Shadowfen. The very thought of venturing into that blighted land sent a shiver down her spine. This was no academic exercise. This was a desperate gambit, a path paved with uncertainty and potentially her own demise. The Bloodstone Shard, if it still existed, was said to be guarded by ancient, corrupted entities, warped by the very darkness it once sought to contain. Alara knew the risks, felt the icy tendrils of doubt attempting to coil around her resolve, yet the urgency of the encroaching threat outweighed her personal fears. She imagined the terror sweeping across the continent, the fractured kingdoms consumed by shadow, and her purpose solidified. This grim knowledge, gleaned from forgotten lore, now placed an unbearable burden upon her young shoulders, a weight she knew she must carry alone. Her decision was swift, though heavy with the weight of its implications. The journey to the Shadowfen was unavoidable if this fragile hope was to be pursued. She carefully resealed the ancient tome, its secrets now etched into her mind, a dangerous map to a potential salvation. Before she embarked on this solitary quest, however, a nagging intuition compelled her to share a fragment of her findings, a cryptic warning to those who might yet stand against the burgeoning night. She knew Kaelin, the valiant knight, was already entangled in the political machinations of Viridia, unaware of the deeper, more insidious threat lurking beyond the battlefield. Later that week, as Kaelin navigated the ornate yet stifling halls of Sunstone City, a small, intricately carved obsidian pendant appeared on his bedside table, seemingly from nowhere. Its surface, smooth and cold, pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth when he touched it. He found no note, no explanation, only the unsettling sense of a presence that had come and gone like a ghost. The pendant depicted a stylized raven, its wings unfurled, clutching a jagged shard of what appeared to be dark crystal. It was a symbol he vaguely recognized from ancient Eldorian lore, associated with forgotten prophecies and the guardians of the veil. Lyra, too, received a similar, albeit more subtle, intimation. A messenger hawk, bearing no discernible markings of any known house, delivered a scroll to her private chambers. Inside, etched not with ink but with a fine, almost invisible dust that shimmered faintly under moonlight, was a single ancient rune, one she recognized from her studies of obscure Viridian mysticism as the Unmaking, or the Shadow's Hunger. It offered no context, no sender, only a chilling sense of foreboding, a whisper of a deeper darkness than mere political strife. The cryptic messages, disparate yet unsettlingly similar in their urgency, were Alara's silent declaration that a greater game was afoot, a game whose rules were written in forgotten magic and whose stakes were the very soul of Etheria. In the venerable halls of Stonehaven, far removed from Sir Kaelin's perilous journey to Viridia, Lord Valerius moved with the practiced grace of a seasoned predator. His pronouncements to the Eldorian court regarding Kaelin's mission were always laced with public praise and solemn hope, a masterclass in performative loyalty. Yet, beneath the veneer of statesmanship, his calculating gaze betrayed a deeper, more insidious intent. He spoke of Kaelin's courage in undertaking such a monumental task, even as his carefully chosen words subtly underscored the inherent folly of trusting Viridians, subtly planting seeds of doubt regarding the sincerity of any potential alliance. Whispers began to circulate through the castle's shadowed corridors, like a venomous mist seeping into the stones themselves. Valerius, through intermediaries and well-placed confidantes, ensured that tales of Kaelin's alleged naivete regarding Viridian deceit reached the ears of influential lords and common folk alike. Some rumors suggested Kaelin was too easily swayed by foreign courtesies. Others hinted at an unknightly fascination with Princess Lyra, implying a distraction from his duty. These narratives, meticulously woven, sought to erode public faith in Kaelin's judgment and the very notion of a lasting peace, painting the quest as a fool's errand doomed to fail. Simultaneously, Valerius seized upon a minor border skirmish along the Whispering Plains, a perennial flashpoint between the kingdoms. A dispute over grazing rights, easily resolved through customary arbitration, was instead inflamed by his intervention. He dispatched a particularly hawkish detachment of Eldorian patrols, ostensibly to protect Eldorian interests, knowing full well their aggressive posture would provoke Viridian retaliation. Reports reaching Stonehaven were then embellished and exaggerated under his careful supervision, framing Viridia as the aggressor and Eldoria as the aggrieved party, further entrenching the ancient animosities Kaelin sought to mend. Valerius observed the escalating tensions with a chilling satisfaction, his ambition a cold fire in his breast. He viewed the dying king's plea for unity as a desperate, sentimental act, a weakness he intended to exploit for his own ascendance. The chaos Kaelin struggled against was, to Valerius, merely a fertile ground for his machinations, a necessary precursor to reshaping Etheria in his own image. He believed Kaelin's idealism would ultimately crumble under the weight of political reality, leaving a power vacuum he was uniquely positioned to fill. The Eldorian court, already predisposed to distrust Viridia, found its prejudices reinforced by Valerius's subtle manipulations. Lords who had initially offered tepid support for Kaelin's mission now voiced growing skepticism, citing the renewed Viridian aggression and the unreliable nature of their diplomatic overtures. Public sentiment, fueled by the carefully curated news from the border, hardened against the prospect of alliance. Kaelin's honorable quest, meant to bridge a chasm, was instead being systematically undermined, its foundations eroded by the very man sworn to protect the kingdom's interests. Each calculated move by Valerius, each whispered falsehood and amplified incident served not only his personal agenda, but inadvertently played into the hands of the encroaching darkness. By fostering disunity and exacerbating the rift between Eldoria and Viridia, he weakened the realm's collective defenses against a far greater, more insidious threat. The shadowy force, ever watchful, thrived on the discord, its tendrils reaching deeper into a fractured Etheria, while Valerius remained oblivious to the true consequences of his selfish ambition. As Kaelin navigated the treacherous political landscape of Sunstone City, unaware of the insidious currents stirring behind him in Eldoria, Valerius continued his methodical dismantling of the four alliance from afar. The knight's unwavering trust, once his greatest strength, was now a gaping vulnerability, leaving him exposed to the silent, unseen blades of betrayal. The path to unity, already fraught with external peril, was now riddled with internal treachery, preparing a devastating homecoming for the honorable Sir Keelan.